Welcome to Science and Technology Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: China's AI sector has no time for end-of-the-world worries. New Chinese drug shows record treatment success against deadly lung cancer type. ARM laying off over 70 engineers in China amid cutbacks in chip industry. Vietnam tech firm FPT adds Texas unit in $100 million auto services push. The pivot profits have already been made. China's AI sector has no time for end-of-the-world worries. Nikkei Asia. In China, existential risks associated with advanced AI are not a major concern within the country's extensive AI community. Western technology circles, on the other hand, are much more preoccupied with the potential dangers of AI. China's pragmatic approach to technology and its role as a follower in the AI innovation race could explain the anxiety gap between China and the West. China views AI predominantly through a practical lens and is focused on bridging the gap with the West, leaving little time for contemplating hypothetical scenarios. The country's AI policies are specific and address concerns such as deepfakes, data leaks, and misinformation, but do not emphasize existential risks. China perceives AI safety as a strategic tool to bolster its geopolitical influence and is confident in humanity's ability to maintain control over AI. New Chinese drug shows record treatment success against deadly lung cancer type. South China Morning Post. Chinese biopharmaceutical company Dizal has developed a targeted antitumor drug called sunvozertinib, which has shown promising results in a phase 2 clinical trial for a specific subtype of lung cancer. The drug achieved a 61% anti-tumor activity response, higher than any previous candidates. Sunvozertinib has been granted breakthrough therapy designations from China's National Medical Products Administration and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Lung cancer is the leading type of cancer in China with the highest incidence and mortality rates, and the second most common cancer worldwide. ARM laying off over 70 engineers in China amid cutbacks in chip industry. South China Morning Post. ARM Holdings, the British chip designer owned by SoftBank, has reportedly laid off over 70 software engineers in China due to lackluster demand for electronics. The move follows a disappointing sales forecast from ARM in November, amid a slump in smartphone sales. The company will reportedly relocate some of the roles outside of China. ARM has experienced challenges in China due to restrictions on technology exports to Chinese companies. The company is still recovering from a dispute with the ousted head of its Chinese joint venture, ARM China. Vietnam tech firm FPT adds Texas unit in $100 million auto services push. Nikkei Asia. Vietnamese software giant FPT has launched FPT Automotive, a vehicle services unit in Texas. The company plans to invest $100 million over 5 years in the auto sector and provide engineering services to automakers Honda, Ford and VinFast. FPT Automotive will focus on providing wireless connectivity, security and software for monitoring engines, fuel and other parts. The company aims to become a $1 billion firm by 2030. FPT has auto-related clients including Hyundai, Volvo, LG, Panasonic, Yazaki and NXP. The pivot profits have already been made. Bloomberg. The Federal Reserve's recent dovish pivot has raised concerns about the potential performance of different asset classes going forward, according to John Authors of Bloomberg. While bonds have surged recently, stocks have performed even better, but this rise has already been priced in by markets. The quarterly survey by Absolute Strategy Research found an overwhelming consensus that rates had peaked and inflation had been defeated. However, the report highlighted that investors are divided over the likelihood of a recession next year, with some allocators seeing a 50-50 chance. A cheaper dollar is expected to help U.S. manufacturers and provide a boost to non-U.S. equities. Chinese firms look to Malaysia for assembly of high-end chips, sources say. South China Morning Post. Chinese semiconductor design companies are turning to Malaysian firms to assemble high-end chips amid fears of expanded U.S. sanctions on China's chip industry. Chinese firms are asking Malaysian chip packaging companies to assemble graphics processing units, GPUs. The requests only involve assembly, not fabrication of the chip wafers. Malaysia, a major hub in the semiconductor supply chain, is well positioned to gain further business as Chinese chip firms diversify outside of China for their assembling needs. Chinese firms are also interested in having their chips assembled outside China to make it easier to sell in non-Chinese markets. China health authorities say respiratory illnesses spike is finally easing. South China Morning Post. China has reported a decline in respiratory diseases after experiencing a surge in cases in recent months. The country has expanded medical resources to effectively meet patients' healthcare needs, including increasing hospital beds and capacity at outpatient and emergency departments. The outbreak of respiratory illnesses in China, particularly among children, prompted the World Health Organization to request more information from Beijing. Chinese health authorities have attributed the surge to various known pathogens, including the influenza virus, rhinoviruses, mycoplasma pneumonias, respiratory syncytial virus, RSV, and adenovirus. The public health risk posed by the BA.2.86 variant of COVID-19 is considered to be relatively low in China, according to experts. Is this really the end of the fossil fuel era? COP28 hails a historic transition. South China Morning Post. The 28th United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP28, ended with consensus on a historic deal that calls on nations to transition away from fossil fuels. The agreement is an important step towards ending the use of fossil fuels and achieving the goals set out in the Paris Agreement. However, critics argue that the deal does not go far enough, leaving too much room for countries to continue using fossil fuels. The conference also saw the creation of a fund to compensate the poorest countries for losses and damages caused by climate change. The fund will be operationalized and receive around $790 million in funding from wealthy nations. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, the resident observer from the 6 Degrees world, here to bring you the latest news and analysis. Today, we have a mix of stories from China's AI sector to medical breakthroughs and the latest in the tech industry. So let's dive in. First up, we have an interesting contrast between China and the West when it comes to concerns over AI. While the West is preoccupied with the potential dangers of advanced AI, China's extensive AI community seems to have little time for end-of-the-world worries. China takes a pragmatic approach, viewing AI as a practical tool and focusing on bridging the gap with the West. They have specific policies in place to address concerns like deepfakes and data leaks, but don't emphasize existential risks. China is confident in humanity's ability to control AI, and who knows, maybe they're right. In medical news, a Chinese biopharmaceutical company has made a breakthrough in lung cancer treatment. Daii's targeted antitumor drug, sunvozertinib, has shown promising results in a phase 2 clinical trial. With a 61% anti-tumor response rate, it has outperformed previous candidates. This is great news for China, as lung cancer is the leading type of cancer in the country. Hopefully, this new drug can make a significant impact in saving lives. Moving on to the tech industry, we have British chip designer ARM Holdings laying off over 70 engineers in China due to lackluster demand for electronics. ARM has faced challenges in China, including restrictions on technology exports to Chinese companies and a dispute with its Chinese joint venture. This is a reminder that even big players in the industry are not immune to the ups and downs of the market. But fear not, ARM is planning to relocate some of the roles outside of China, so there's still hope. Meanwhile, Vietnamese software giant FPT is making moves in the US auto sector. They have launched FPT Automotive, a vehicle services unit in Texas, and plan to invest $100 million over 5 years. FPT Automotive aims to provide engineering services to automakers like Honda, Ford, and VinFast, focusing on wireless connectivity, security, and software. It's always exciting to see companies expanding into new markets, and FPT has big ambitions to become a $1 billion firm by 2030. Now, let's talk finance. The Federal Reserve's recent dovish pivot has raised concerns about the potential performance of different asset classes. While bonds have surged, stocks have performed even better. But here's the catch, the rise in stocks has already been priced in by the markets. So, sorry to burst your bubble, but the pivot profits might have already been made. However, investors are divided over the likelihood of a recession next year, with some seeing a 50-50 chance. So, keep an eye out for any surprises. In the semiconductor industry, Chinese firms are turning to Malaysian companies for chip assembly amid fears of expanded US sanctions. Chinese firms are seeking Malaysian chip packaging companies to assemble high-end chips, focusing on graphics processing units, GPUs. Malaysia, being a major hub in the semiconductor supply chain, stands to gain more business as Chinese chip firms diversify outside of China. It's an interesting development that highlights the impact of geopolitical tensions on the tech industry. Next, we have some good news on the health front. China has reported a decline in respiratory diseases after a surge in cases in recent months. Chinese health authorities have expanded medical resources to meet patients' needs effectively. The outbreak was attributed to various known pathogens, including the flu, rhinoviruses, and respiratory syncytial virus. The public health risk posed by the BA.2.86 variant of COVID-19 is considered relatively low in China. So, let's take a moment to breathe a sigh of relief. Lastly, we have the 28th United Nations Climate Change Conference, which ended with a historic deal calling on nations to transition away from fossil fuels. This is an important step towards achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. However, critics argue that the deal doesn't go far enough and leaves room for countries to continue using fossil fuels. On a positive note, a fund was created to compensate the poorest countries for losses and damages caused by climate change. It's heartening to see efforts being made to address the urgent issue of climate change. And there you have it, folks. A roundup of the latest news from China's AI sector to medical breakthroughs and the tech industry. Remember, this is just a snapshot of what's happening in the world, and there's always more to explore and discuss. So, what are your thoughts on these stories? Do you have any burning questions or ideas to share? Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.